Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Garden Gossip Show. We love gossip and we love gardens, and we have some really good gossip because there's a new book out. In fact, it's an updated edition. It is called Bale Gardens Complete, the updated edition, breakthrough method for growing vegetables anywhere, earlier, and with, guess what, no weeding. We love it. It is out now through Cool Springs Press. It is by gardening pioneer, Bale gardening pioneer, Joel Karsten, and he's joining us now. And go to his website, strawbalegardens.com. If you have not heard of this or tried this, this is going to blow your mind. It is so cool. Seriously. And when you hear the words no weeding, everybody, and even in the beginning of the book, he talks about like, this is like one of those things you don't believe, but it really does happen. So he's a miracle worker. So welcome to the show, Joel. How are you?
Well, that's quite a welcome. Thank you so much, Lisa. And hi, Nancy.
Hey,
Hi.
we're excited about this. One thing is, I think people don't realize that pretty much anyone can have a garden. The very first thing, I think, Nancy, when you were reading this too, we were both going, we lived out,
Man.
yeah, the soil,
Yeah.
the soil thing. We went very similar to what you talked about when you were graduated from college and wanted to put in a garden in your first house. And we did this in 29 Palms outside Joshua Tree National Park in the high desert of California. We got excited. We were getting the house, and the owner goes, well, that we were getting it from, buying it from, takes me outside and starts telling me, oh, these things pop up, and you just need to whack them, kill these. These are all weeds. And they were desert primrose. And I'm like, you need to stop killing these wildflowers now, or I'm going to kill you. Like, I'm not buying the house if you don't do this. Leave them alone. It's ours now. Anyway, turns out that was about the only thing that really grew there. We had some Palo Verde trees, and then Nancy, of course, she's a major gardener, and she just puts me to work. I dig, and so there's not really much digging with this. So I'm like digging this,
This is
quite frankly.
awesome.
But we planted wildflowers. We started with
Everything.
wildflowers, thinking this would be good. They were all for that area, and they came out like little teeny
Midgets.
you can't say that word. Tiny little poppies, like little because the soil,
Miniature.
we didn't realize that the soil was so bad, and this house was from the 80s, and so no one had amended the soil for 30 years. Like insane.
Yeah. You know, when you start a vegetable garden, there's a lot of limiting factors, one of which is the soil. Whether you have good soil or you need to do a bunch of soil modification, that can be a lot of physical work and can be really expensive to get your soil in good condition to be able to plant. The other thing is that people don't think about is tools. You know, to do a normal garden, you need a lot of tools, and it's a big
You do.
for a new gardener who's never done gardening before. They got to invest in all these tools. And then, you know, there can be some physical limitations for people who can't get down on the ground and do that physical part of gardening. You know, if you're in a desert area, it can be water that can be an issue. You know, traditional gardens can take a lot of water. And really, this method kind of solves all of these things at once because you don't need your own soil. You're going to use the bale. The bale, that's the thing, the illusion about a straw bale or a hay bale is people think you're growing in straw. You're really not. You're growing in decomposed straw. So the decomposed of the bale is going to quickly become soil. You know, it begins very quickly. So the interior of the bale becomes the soil that then supports the growth of the plants. So yes, it's on the outside, it still looks like a straw bale, and it will, for the most of the season, it'll stay in the shape and kind of have the look of a straw bale. But the inside is where all the action happens. That's where all the microbes are. We're gonna get a flurry of microbes to grow, and that's what your plants are going to get their nutrients from inside the bale. So it solves that problem with soil. You don't need any tools. You know, if you have a pruning shears, it's really about all you need. Maybe a planting trowel. That's about all you need to do this kind of garden. There's not a lot of other tools and things required. And from a physical standpoint, you're already starting about 18 or 20 inches up off the ground. So it makes it much easier. Sorry about the siren in the background. I'm just outside.
They're coming to take him away.
Of course, some siren has to come by right when we're doing an interview.
I know, that's funny.
It'll go away quickly. Could be worse. Could be a train or something. Okay, so that makes a really big difference. So it really solves almost all of the gardening problems that people have when they first start out. So I really encourage people who are brand new gardeners. It's a great method to kind of introduce them to gardening. For people who already have big gardens but want to add vegetables, it's a great thing because there's no weeds, so it eliminates a lot of the maintenance of a traditional garden, and it takes less water over the long term. And for people who are seniors who physically are a little bit challenged, my grandma Josephine was like that. She used to say, getting down on the ground is easy. Getting up, that's where I have trouble.
I've fallen and I can't get up. Yeah, exactly.
Straw bales, if you can bend over to 20 inches and touch your knees, you can do a straw bale garden. So,
well, I think too for kids, and Nancy and I were talking about this. As soon as we heard of you, I'm like, we've seen this. We've seen, because we do a lot. We've seen straw bale gardens and botanical gardens. Actual botanical gardens, because we do that across the country. And then, as you know, we pet sit across the country. And I know that we took care, there was this one garden, and I believe it was in Connecticut. And I need to dig through my photos and see, because it was like they were all raised, and it wasn't raised beds. I think they absolutely, no matter how it was straw bale, because Nancy and I kept going, this is really different because everything was growing up instead of across. And everything was, the irrigation just did its own thing. It was like this easy garden. And we were just going out going, oh, we're just harvesting. This is fun. We didn't have to do that much work,
Yeah,
So
the crop process takes about 12 days. If you're doing it organically, it takes about 5 days longer, about 18 days. So you got to get your bales, and then we call it conditioning, the conditioning process. And that's really beginning stages of composting is what we're doing. So we're going to add water, and then we're going to add what's key is a source of nitrogen. So that can be organic or traditional. We make a product now called Bale Buster, which is, this is made for 4 bales, one size pack. So you just sprinkle this on the bale and you water it. And after 12 days or so, the inside of the bale has decomposed enough that you can start planting. As long as it's cooled down, you'll see the bales will get real hot for that 2-week period when you're conditioning. Then they'll cool off. And as long as they're under 100 degrees or 105 degrees is really the cutoff. Then you can put your transplants into the bale. If you're doing seeds, you need to make a real thin coat of planting mix or potting mix on top of the bale. You don't want to use your soil because that's going to have weed seeds. It could have potential disease harboring in the soil, and then you'll introduce that to the garden. This way it stays, it's kind of like virgin soil that we're dealing with. Potting mix with no seeds or anything in it, and then we've got the bale, which is brand new soil, and there shouldn't be any seeds in that. You might get a couple little sprouts of oats or wheat if there's any seeds left over. Those are real easy to deal with. Usually they just dry up and kind of go away, or you can just pluck them out a little bit with your finger. But other than that, you'll go the whole season. I get amazing social media because in the fall, people will say on our social media, I'm so mad I didn't discover this 20 years ago. I've been pulling weeds for 20 years and now I haven't pulled a single weed all summer. We're so excited.
What's the difference between doing this? I mean, the straw, like to me, this is becoming, you're growing within a growing environment. Like what I find, I kind of look at it as beer, like the grains that you use in brewing beer. You get the spent, the wheat afterwards, right? And listen, there's nutrition in beer. They say a Guinness, you could drink a Guinness and you don't have to eat for 30 days. There's so much nutrition. Anyway, I don't know if that's listen, I don't care.
Experiment.
But the thing is, I'll just have a Guinness a day and I'll be happy. But but they say, because beer actually has a lot of nutrients, and I wondered about it because it's a grain.
Yeah, it comes from the grains. What we're dealing with, the straw, is what's left over. It's the stalks of the grain. So the oats and the wheat should be harvested, and those become Wheaties and oatmeal and Guinness, etc. And then left over is the stalks. But inside those stalks are still this kind of the science behind it. There is still the molecules that created the cells, that created the stems and the leaves and the roots and all the parts of that plant. Some of those cells were harvested when the oats and wheat got harvested, but all the rest of the cells are still there. They're just trapped inside the stalks of the stems or the leaves of this oats or wheat plant. and not available for anything else. But what happens is we feed these microbes this nitrogen during conditioning, and these microbes will colonize the whole bale. So the whole bale will flood with these microbes. That's why the bales get warm. There's some reasons why that happens, but it's really friction. It's replicating microbes that vibrate and cause friction, which dissipates as heat. So your bales will get warm. They colonize with microbes. Now these microbes are going to metabolize the straw itself. So they're gonna, it's not really eating because they don't have mouths, but they kind of dissolve the cellular structures in the leaves and the stems of these oats and wheat plant. And when they dissolve those structures, break down the lignin and stuff in those structures, it gets absorbed into their little microbial bodies. And then a few days later, those microbes will die and the endoplasm is released from inside their bodies. And that's where nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, molybdenum, zinc, calcium, iron, manganese, all of the micro and macronutrients that a plant needs to grow that were already inside these plants, inside the bale, are now released and become available for the roots of a new plant to absorb.
Wow.
So it's very sort of a microcosm of the entire Earth's biology that happens inside these bales. It's really fascinating.
So that is what makes it better than raised beds, like when people do the boxes, those raised bed boxes.
Raised beds, essentially, you're going to go get soil or potting mix of some kind to fill those raised beds. And what does all good black soil have in common with any good growing or good garden? It's decomposed organic matter. That's what makes soil. All soil on Earth is composed of decomposed organic matter. Could be plants or animals, but something that once was alive dies, is decomposed by bacteria. Always bacteria is the final decomposer, breaks it down, and it becomes soil. And soil is really just a euphemism for an environment filled with ions and cations of free molecules: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, molybdenum, zinc, all these micro and macronutrients that the plant roots need to absorb to make new molecules, to make new cells, to make new stems and leaves and flowers and seeds, etc.
So what about fertilizer? Are we going to need fertilizer?
It kind of depends on what you're growing. If you're growing something that's a really heavy feeder, you may need to supplement a little bit throughout the season. But plants will tell you, the leaf, if you watch the leaf color, it'll turn a lighter green, that's a nitrogen deficiency. If you get some purplish color to the leaves, you need phosphorus. If it's not flowering well, it depends on what the nutrient that's missing. But the plants will tell you. Traditionally, on my garden, I don't add any fertilizer at all throughout the season because all the fertility is there inside the bale. And once that conditioning process happens, it's all available. Now, for people who make the biggest mistake that new straw bale gardeners make, they overwater. It's very common. And they do this because they can't see, like in a normal garden, you can see puddles start to form. Well, in the bale, the water runs through the bale real quickly. So I always encourage people 1 gallon per application. Every bale gets 1 gallon. So if you got 10 bales, you're only going to water 10 gallons. Well, if your faucet gives you 2 gallons a minute, it's only 5 minutes of water. It doesn't seem like it's long enough. So people will water for a half an hour, or they'll water for
right.
And they say, "Oh, my garden doesn't look good. And it looks like it's dry. And I've been watering for a half an hour every day." And then I try to explain to them that after the first 5 minutes, now the bale's fully saturated and the rest of the water's running through and out, and it's carrying out with it soluble nutrients, particularly nitrogen. So now you're leaching your nitrogen, your calcium, other soluble nutrients out, and you're going to have to add those back in order to replace the ones you leached out. So the solution to that is don't overwater. If you don't water too much, just get the bales wet. Just replenish the supply of moisture that was evaporated, that was used by the plants out of the bales, which isn't much in the spring and fall. In the midsummer, I got an 8-foot tall tomato with 100 tomatoes up there. That thing's going to use 2, 3, 4 gallons a day out of that bale. So I might water 3 times a day, only a gallon at a time. That's very different than watering 1 time a day with 5 gallons, because 1 gallon stays in, 4 gallons run through. So anytime there's running through and out the bale, you're overwatering. So slow that down. You won't have to add much, if any, fertilizer at all throughout the whole season.
What is it in regards to water? Are we using less or more, or does that just, if you have like a typical raised bed or an actual, now you've gone and spent the money to do your bed, like without the straw bale, where are we on that water? Because I know people are conscious of that. Well, now it's getting all weird and different depending where you are.
Yeah, water is a resource, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's expensive. If you have to pay for your water, it can be expensive. Here's the thing about straw in general. In agriculture, the main use for straw historically has been as animal bedding, livestock bedding. The reason we use it for bedding is because it's extremely absorptive. It will suck up and hold a bunch of moisture. If you think about these stems of straw, they're little hollow tubes.
Yeah.
And droplet of water gets inside that hollow tube and then it can't get back out. It's adhesion and cohesion, two basic principles of physics. But these hollow tubes will all fill up with water that can't get out of the bale. So you get a dry bale and you put it in a water tank and let it saturate, completely soak for a day, then pull it out and weigh it. And you can tell how much water is held inside the bale. And a dry bale of straw will hold anywhere from 5 to 7 gallons of water inside that. So it has an amazing water holding capacity. Now you are going to get some evaporation, especially in hot, dry climates. I got gardeners that evaporates. So they got to water every morning. They'll put 5-10 minutes of water on top to get another gallon back in there. If they're using a drip system, kind of depends on how fast their bales are getting water, but they'll water and then it evaporates throughout the day. They might have to water 2 or 3 times a day because of that evaporation, but only a gallon each time. So I tell people it's kind of like adding one more person to your family, because a typical shower takes 25 gallons. If you had a 20 bale straw bale garden, that's like adding one more person to your family in terms of showering, how much water use you get. You can use gray water for these as well. If you have a system that captures gray water, like from washing and stuff, you can use it on here. It can be difficult in traditional soil gardens because that soap and the phosphates and stuff in the soap will accumulate in the soil over time, and you get a salt buildup in your soil. But the bales, we're only going to use these bales for 2 seasons. Once we're done with 2 seasons, essentially we till this into the soil and it becomes compost.
So yeah, that's what I was going to say, because most compost gardens, we did pet sitting on a farm. The compost was all about straw. Every time you did something, you had to add straw. And that was the first thing I thought, something's going on when you're having straw. So with doing this, do the bales actually start helping the soil that you had bad soil before? Does it actually help your topsoil? Because that's something I think we're in big trouble with in this country, is topsoil.
Yeah, it vastly improves they call it the tilth of your soil. By adding organic matter, it makes it more crumbly, drains, adds nutrients. It is a great solution for anybody who has a sandy soil or a heavy, like a clay soil. The solution, add compost, and this makes the best compost. What's really funny is, before we had such thing as a greenhouse supplier where you could buy bags of potting mix and things, nurserymen who would start plants early, I'm talking about like the early 1900s, they would make their own starter soil from decomposed straw. That's what they use, because it makes such a beautiful, clean compost that decomposed straw made the best starter mix for seeds and for anything that was like potted. It's a little different world back then than now. With our plastic pots and things, they had to make things out of wood, but their potting mix that they used was very often decomposed straw, because it's very effective.
Do you think this is something we can do in food deserts? I see a lot of people, we see a lot of food deserts in places you wouldn't believe are a food desert, even if it's an agricultural area. Some communities find it hard to get fresh produce, and by the time it gets there, it's over and out. Like it's, and it's not necessarily healthy. And if you know what I mean, you may not be growing organically, but with the big seal, but you can do pest management in a there's just all kinds of ways you can do it without, drinking bad chemicals.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. If you're in the United States, it's pretty, there are food deserts for sure, parts of cities where there's food deserts. But you're usually within, an hour or half an hour of a source of fresh produce. Places where we work in the world now are places like Cambodia and the Philippines and parts of Africa, where if they don't have a food supply, they're 4 hours from civilization.
Yeah.
And because they don't have roads and they don't have capacity, they don't have refrigerated trucks. So it becomes very difficult to have fresh produce available for the population. Actually did a TED talk about this
Right.
specific. So if people are interested, they can go on YouTube or TED.
Go to your website. Let's give everyone your website again, because that's where you can get the
Yeah.
book and the products too. Strawbalegardens.com is pretty easy.
Yeah.
And then you have people that actually go out and teach, right? How to do this.
Yeah, we have over 100 certified instructors
Wow.
Wow, that's great.
around the world.
Wow.
Actually, we have several in Europe and Asia, and they
Cool.
they just get a certification, meaning that they've been trained and that they understand the process and they have the resources. We provide slide presentations and stuff so that they can go out and teach. We don't pay them, they don't pay us. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. But often they charge their audiences. I got people that go to university to teach and go to master gardener programs and teach this method. It's quickly being adopted in places like Asia and particular places that we talk about food deserts, where there could be a 3 to 5 month period of the year where they can't grow fresh vegetables. They just physically can't do it. For instance, in Cambodia, there's a period where there's floods, and everything is 5 feet underwater. They're great farmers during the farming season. They grow rice, lots of rice, and they store rice. But during that 3 months when it's flooding, and in a month and a half or 2 months when it's drought and it's like 100 degrees or 110 degrees and there's no water anywhere, they don't have pumps and electricity like we have out in these rural areas. They have no way to get their crops to survive. They could plant corn, but it would all dry up in the 110 degrees.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is a great solution for them to solve that problem during those times of year. It's explained a lot on our website. You can read more articles and stuff about how we did that, how we accomplished solving that problem. But being able to feed yourself 12 months a year in these parts of the world has never been a thing. They've lived for centuries in rural parts of Cambodia without having fresh produce for 4 or 5 months a year. And it's very detrimental, especially to developing brains of very young children, from 0 to 2. They really need a wider variety of nutrients. As adults, we accumulate some fat reserves and we can get by. It's not the end of the world if we don't have if we have food, but we don't have fresh vegetables.
Or Guinness.
Right. Or Guinness, exactly. But
okay.
It kind of depends on where you go in the world. The more you travel, as you guys know, the more you learn how good we really do have it here in the United States.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Even people here who are, in food deserts or considered poor, part of our poor population or less well-served population, still have access to food somehow. They figure it out. There's food shelves, there's resources available, and they're not in a situation where they'll go 3 or 4 days without eating. That's very usual. Over there, it's very common, and it's so heartbreaking. And it's not even that the people themselves have to go without food, but it's them watching their children go without food.
Yeah.
That is a motivator. And that's the reason why I tell people that this method is being adopted quickly, is because hungry stomachs make people desperate for solutions. And if they can find a solution like this, that, number one, doesn't cost anything. We've showed them how they can do this essentially for free without any capital investment at all. And it's crazy how we can make that work, but they can do it without anybody else giving them inputs. The only source of outside input in Cambodia that they have is a source of nitrogen fertilizer, and that's provided by their government because they already use it for their rice crops. Otherwise, all the other resources they can get themselves. It's just the technology kind of how to do it. That is the game changer.
That's awesome. I think, we talk about, living in Kenya and South Africa and certain areas, it depends on the climate. Are you in the rainy season? The equator, we talk about, you can put anything out there and it'll grow. However, climate change is happening in areas, and some places like getting water, like you're saying, is a very big deal. We lived out in the boonies, and Nancy, I used to have to walk to a cistern and bring back water, go before you go to school, when you come back from school. And it was, you got a real appreciation for water when you have to do that kind of thing as a kid. But I think, even for here in our country, where we actually have a problem where kids don't know where food comes from. They don't understand
Exactly.
agriculture. I mean, agritourism is on the rise, which I think is great. But I mean, I've gone to a grocery store back in the day when people actually bagged your groceries and, bought leeks. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, how do you not know what a leek is? So I feel like, whatever we can do that is something fun for a family to do and to get kids involved, then maybe they're going to be excited about actually eating those vegetables and those fruits, So I think this is a cool family project for the summer.
Yeah, it's a great thing to introduce if anybody's involved in education. The state of California has this as part of their growing food segment for grade school kids up through high school, actually, but usually it's grade school focused. And they did a whole program just specifically about straw bale gardening. And that's something, if people wanted to read more about, they could Google it. But any state could adopt that. It's just California did a bunch of curricula and stuff like that that they make available, so anybody can get their hands on that and be able to use that in the classroom.
Do you see restaurants doing this? Like,
amazingly enough, we have one right here in Minneapolis, and I don't even know I didn't know the chef before he started doing this, but he has a farm to table restaurant in the Hyatt down by the airport, and he has bales in the parking lot. So he grows.
No way, at the Hyatt?
That's cool.
Dude.
Yeah, it's a farm to table restaurant. And we have restaurants all over. There's one in New Mexico that has a big feature growing area with straw bale gardens. And there's a whole bunch of examples around the country of chefs that are using straw bale gardening, or just restaurants in general that are using it. I got a few on the roof that have it on the rooftop as well.
No way, that's cool.
Yeah.
See, I think you can get really creative with it, because you don't have to go get a plow and a donkey. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, or people to dig up the garden for you. You just move the bales. You can make it circular if you want, or squiggly designed, and you can make a border with flowers if you want. I mean, I think it's totally creative. There's a lot you can do with this.
It's a great way, sort of an introduction to gardening. Have you guys ever heard of, I'm sure you've heard of My Little Library, right?
Yeah.
Neighborhood
the
library.
Little box. Yeah.
We have a program we're kicking off. You're the first to know about this, but
cool.
we've been working on and fashioning this program. It's going to be called My Little Garden. And it's essentially it's a pallet size garden. So it's 3 bales on a pallet with a little picket fence. So you make this out of 2 pallets essentially, and 3 bales of straw. And it'll have some cute signage and stuff on it. And we'll just be providing the plans via PDF file, and then sort of a way to have a directory, kind of like the My Little Library program does. The guy who started that's actually pretty local here to the Twin Cities where I live.
Oh, cool.
Originally from Wisconsin, but we claim him because they're so close by. And he's very successful. They have over 70,000 of those now all around the world. But the My Little Garden is a great way to do kind of the same thing. The My Little Library is about getting kids interested in reading and sharing books, etc. And this could be a great way to get people interested in gardening and have produce there. When you walk by, you can pick a cherry tomato off. It's like a community type garden. They can learn how to do it, watch the process, and pick a little cucumber or whatever when it's ripe, and share with the neighbors, as well as teach the kids in the neighborhood, and maybe get people interested in doing it themselves in their own backyards.
I love this.
That's awesome.
My Little library, we see them in parks across the country, and I photographed them as part of our documentation. Because that's what, we started off just doing national parks, which have gardens, by the way. And then when every park matters, because we realized every pocket park, some of them have a community garden. And I think downtown Savannah, that's where I saw straw bales. In Savannah, we were in the arts district where SCADS, that's what they call it. Anyway, that's the college there, arts. And there was this, you're surrounded by these houses, and it's city. And here's this little community garden with straw bales. That's exactly, because I was walking the little Frenchie around and going, check that out. No, do not pee on the straw bale. But,
I bet people write me emails and they say, I was walking through Epcot at Disney looking at different displays during garden, and there was a straw bale garden.
We saw it at the flower fields in Carlsbad, California. I think they had that. Yeah, okay. So, that's going to be one of the first ones I think we saw, because we were like, "Ooh, this is cool," because they were showing how you can
Mhm.
grow things in old boots, and they were showing that kind of
Right.
thing. And it was really
Mm.
for kids, and I love that. But I would love to see what you're talking about with My Little Garden be in actual community parks. And I know, like in
Mm.
LA, a lot of people are transforming their front lawns into food so that people that
Finally.
are homeless, they're experiencing homelessness, can actually go and grab an orange or a peach or a strawberry, or like pull a carrot up
Mhm.
and eat it, so that it's something healthy. Because even the food banks are trying to get away. I was we were doing a
Mm.
thing with a farm where I'd go harvest the fruits, the vegetables, really vegetable. Listen, picking that many peppers, that's, I'll do the straw
That was
bale
funny.
thing. Listen, and eggs and everything, but I would take them to the food bank. And one day I went the wrong time and ended up in the line of everybody going to get their food. And it was right in the middle of the pandemic, and you could see families and like understand, like everybody had, there was this changeover of who needed food. It was really everybody was in shock, but they were
Eye
so nice.
opener.
And they were so excited about fresh produce. And someone came and donated a bunch of soda, and they didn't want to give it out. They were like, "Don't you want to take this
Mhm.
with you?" And I'm like, "I don't want it," and they didn't want it. They wanted, because a lot of times food banks, it is these non-perishable items, but when you can give families these, and they were like things like peppers, because there were a lot of ethnic cultures that are, we've got a lot of immigration, happening, and the people coming into our country. I'm not getting political, but I'm just saying they miss their food. I know what it's like to live in different countries, and I'll do anything for certain curries, like I will. And but but you want those things, and you can do this affordably in these communities that are getting started across. And I know Minnesota, you have also, a lot of, new people coming in, where if they want to grow something from what they used to eat back home, this is a way to do it economically for their family, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The startup cost is minimal, especially when compared to starting a traditional vegetable garden. People
Oh,
think, oh,
yeah.
you just got to rototill up your soil and plant. Okay, you do that and let me know how successful you are. It's very difficult, to just till up your soil and plant a garden. There's a lot of soil modifications, and you
Hmm.
got to understand what you're doing. The big thing is I used to work at a garden center when I was, oh God, many years ago, when I was in college. So more than 30
By the
years.
way, see, he did study horticulture. Can you tell?
Yeah.
He knows the geek stuff.
And so when I was in college, I worked at this garden center, and we would get young couples that would come in, they just bought a house and they want to plant a
Oh
vegetable.
yeah.
And so I would sell them all the seeds and all the stuff they needed, and a hoe and a rake and a shovel. And, I'd send them home with a carload of stuff. And I'd talk to them 2 months later, and they'd say, garden didn't work out. And I'd say, well, what happened? Well, we rototilled up our grass and we planted a bunch of peas and beans, but we didn't know what were the peas and what were the weeds and what were the beans. So we just didn't pull anything. And then a month later, when we tried pulling out the weeds, it pulled out the peas and the beans too. And the whole thing was a mess. So we just mowed it off. I guess we're not gardeners. And that was it. That was the
Oh,
way I did
that's a
gardening.
shame.
So sad. Yeah. And so with this method, if they just get through the 12 days of prep and they get something planted in those bales, I assure you they are going to harvest. They're going to harvest something. You're never going to get 100% of what you plant is going to produce, but you're going to get something. And a little
Yes.
bit of success breeds enthusiasm. Someone
Mm.
comes over to your house and you give them a salad that you made from your own tomatoes, your own cucumbers, your own green peppers, and it blows them away that you were able to do this and how good and how fresh it is. And
It's
it
so fresh.
starts a fire inside of people, and it makes them
Mm.
excited about gardening. It makes them think, oh, I've got a green thumb. And then boom, their whole yard turns into gardens.
Well, and
So
you could do flowers too. The
yeah, oh,
flower thing.
sure.
I love
Yeah.
that too,
Well,
because that
yeah.
brightens your day.
Yeah,
You
flower
need
power.
flowers.
And you could do designs,
Mm.
like you could create your own maze in your garden, like your
Yeah,
own maze of straw.
exactly.
That was my first thing. I want a
I want to
maze.
be, yeah. That's how, remember, we had one garden in 29 Palms in California, and it
Yeah, that's
gets
what we were talking
really
about. Yeah.
hot. And in our neighborhood, nobody had a garden. It was either a lawn or just dirt. And we're like, So we'll try planting a desert garden with different kinds of plants and vegetables and roses and
I wish we knew
oh,
this.
yeah, I know it would have been so much easier. It was hard work.
Yeah.
That
And
soil
and
was
I
so tough
learned,
with those chemicals. We had to
oh, there
use
was so
manure.
much.
We did
Yeah.
manure, topsoil. We spent a
Oh,
few
so much.
thousand on
Yeah.
changing the soil.
And
And
I learned
yeah,
like by the buildings, by where the house was, the the temperature was 15 degrees higher than away from the walls.
Yeah.
So
It's
if you
different.
planted next to a wall, one side of the plant that wasn't in the sun still got burned. I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
but this
Yeah.
is natural. See, it won't burn your plants. This is natural, you know?
But so I see where the straw bales, I mean, okay, so you can move them around, put them in any design you want at any level.
Yep.
And
It's
I
a
mean,
lot
the
like
yeah, the flexibility, the creativity, and the ease of it. I
yeah,
mean, I really don't want to bend over with a hoe all day long either.
yeah. Traditional gardening is a lot of work. Growing up
Hmm.
on a farm, so I know all about pulling weeds and
Yeah,
before chemicals, we had to actually pull the weeds out of the fields. Now they spray everything, but in the old days, we
yeah,
had to actually go through and hoe and pull the weeds. It's a lot of work. Nobody likes that job.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, gardening is the same way. Who likes to pull weeds? So if you can do a garden without having lots of weeds to deal with, and you still get great results, people will ask me, why do you plant in bales? I don't understand. Why would you spend the extra $5 to buy a bale? I say, how much time do you spend weeding in your garden? I can buy
Yeah.
20 bales for $100. Well, I can't weed for very long when my time is valuable. I can't weed for very long. And I would spend at least 50 hours in a summer
Mm.
weeding that same size garden. It's worth more than $2 an hour for me.
Well, also just being
Yeah.
able to go outside and getting something like really fresh, like that hasn't been
Mhm.
sitting on refrigeration for so long.
Yeah.
And also, when you want to buy, what's so weird now, we want organic, right? But now organic is always packaged. It's actually hard to find, depending on where you are in the country. They tend
Yeah.
to wrap every cucumber, every zucchini, everything's wrapped. And
In plastic.
so here's all this plastic, and that's not good for the environment. So, for those of us who care about that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I always tell people, if you've never gone out to your garden and picked a little basket of peas and brought them in the house and shucked those peas and
Mm.
steamed them and put some butter and salt on them and eaten those, you have never really eaten peas because it
No.
is the greatest flavor, better than any restaurant on earth. Because with most produce, as soon as you pick it, it starts to deteriorate slowly. Same thing with corn, same thing with tomatoes is another really good example. With tomatoes, they breed tomatoes for sale at the grocery store to have thick outer skins because they last
Mhm.
better, they store better, they travel better, they don't bruise easily. But the thicker skins makes them less palatable and they don't taste as good. The really thin skin tomatoes, a lot of the heirloom, the older varieties, they tend to be more subject to disease and insect problems. So you get a little speck or a little flaw. Nobody wants that at the grocery store because the consumer won't buy it. But they have the best flavor. And those really thin skins don't travel well, they don't store well, but they taste great. So you go out to your garden
Yeah.
and you pick a couple of these beautiful heirloom tomatoes and you slice them up. And your friends that come over for dinner have never had a tomato that good because they bought all their tomatoes at the grocery store.
I
Or even
can't eat those
farmers.
other tomatoes.
Yeah,
I've had an aversion to tomatoes I can eat cooked tomatoes, but then until like it was an heirloom tomato from someone's yard, I was like, oh, I can eat that,
yeah.
That's a
but I
This is
can't do
what
the
they're
others.
supposed to taste like, exactly.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
texture thing. It just before you go, I wanted to touch on this. I know that we're in, early summer, depending on where you live, late spring. So a lot of people are out gardening now. But what happens when it gets to winter? Now we understand your winter. We did the Wisconsin winter this year, and like, yikes. And I understand the importance
Mm.
of sunrooms, but even they get cold. Can you do this in a greenhouse or in some kind of way to still grow things?
I get people that will grow tomatoes starting very early, which for us, February, March is really early. I
Yeah.
mean, it's still feet of snow on the ground, but they'll do it in a real greenhouse, like a nursery greenhouse. But then we also have what we call on our website, we call this the 6-week greenhouse. And this is a very simple greenhouse. It's made out of 2 cattle panels that are humped over, and then it's covered in polyfilm, which is you can reuse from year to year. So you only need to do it once. And it's got a zipper door on it. You put 6 bales inside this little house. It's 6 feet tall or 6.5 feet tall. So you can walk inside. You put 6 bales in there. And when you start conditioning the bales, they get hot. So they warm up this greenhouse. So in Minnesota, where we really can't plant until end of May, late May, we'll start this greenhouse at the beginning of April. And then we use the bales as benches inside the little greenhouse to put our flats with our seeds, to start seeds ahead of time. And the little greenhouse outside will get nice and warm. You put a few 5-gallon buckets of water, it'll warm up the water when the sun's out during the day. And then at night, that radiates heat and it keeps the greenhouse well above freezing. Spring season. So it's a fun little thing to do, is build these little, it's under $100 to build the whole thing. We give you the plans. We don't sell greenhouses or anything. We just give you the plans how to build it. So you'd go to the farm supply store, buy 2 cattle panels and then some poly, and we tell you the basics of how to build it. And people are really creative. They come up with all kinds of neat looking little greenhouses.
So tell us about the club. You have like a club. Is this about, everybody like having fun and getting creative gets to talk together?
Yeah, essentially that's what it is. You can join for free. We have a sprout membership, which is free. And then we have a seedling and a blossom level membership. And then we have a harvest level membership. Harvest level, you get me in person for 30 minutes for your garden club or whatever to do a presentation. But the other 2 levels, essentially you get discounts on anything you buy, and you get to participate in our monthly chats, which are 100 people online, and we answer questions, and sometimes we bring in speakers and things about different subject matter, and all kinds of blogs. You can read the blogs if you're even a free membership, and you can watch videos. We have almost 100 videos that we've spent years producing, and they're all professionally shot and professional sound, so the quality is really good and the information is solid. You can Google a question online. There's lots of people out there now talking about straw bale gardening because I kind of made it a thing. And some of the information is very accurate. They'll give you good information, but unfortunately there's some bad information out there too. And there's nothing worse than getting a call from someone that, is frustrated. And then I ask them, well, how do you do the conditioning, the prep process? And they explain it. I'm like, where did you get that information? They say, oh, I got it from, Master Gardeners, or I got it from a university. And I say, well, that's really bad information. They're not giving out good information about how to do this. So, it's a free place. People can come. And then if they really like it, they can share pictures, they can participate.
Oh, cool.
It's a lot of fun.
That's really cool. I think it's important because, people do go off and do things. We know, like, people have stolen our magazine stuff. So, like, it happens. I have a friend who's a publisher and a coach, and somebody absolutely just copied everything she does on Facebook. I mean, word for word. And we're all sitting there going in disbelief. And because it's on social media, we can all go, hey, we can see exactly, you know what I mean? It's like, it's right there in, plain sight. But I see why having the club is important, because you want people to be successful in something that is really relatively easy to do. And it's a food source. So to me, that's an important thing. And I like that you have instructors that do go out that have gone through your training, so people can find the right thing. It's awesome. So this is the updated version of the very first book. So this is golden. Everybody, you can get it now in Amazon, but you can get it right off your website too, right? So if everyone goes to strawbalegardens.com, you can see the TEDx talk there, the club, everything is on there. But again, the book is by Joel Karsten, and it's Straw Bale Gardens Complete, updated edition, breakthrough method for growing vegetables anywhere earlier and with no weeding. And it's published by Cool Springs Press. We love them too. So thank you so much, Joel. I want to go garden. We're going to start taking straw bales to everyone's houses now as we travel the country.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, spread the word. Like I tell
we normally leave people plants, but now it's going to be a straw bale. Like, hey, get the hint.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thanks.
having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you guys are helping spread the word. So
Oh, absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
problem,
You
no
take care
problem.
and happy sowing seeds and getting your plants out for summer.
that's that time of year right now. So thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome.